12.4. The Filibuster and the Quest for New Slave States. Learning Objectives. By the end of this section, you will be able to explain the expansionist goals of advocates of slavery. Describe the filibuster expeditions undertaken during the antebellum era.
Southern expansionists had spearheaded the drive to add more territory to the United States. They applauded the Louisiana Purchase and fervently supported Native American removal, the annexation of Texas, and the Mexican-American War. Drawing inspiration from the annexation of Texas, pro-slavery expansionists hoped to replicate that feat by bringing Cuba and other territories into the United States and thereby enlarging the American empire of slavery. In the 1850s, the expansionist drive among white Southerners intensified. Among Southern imperialists, one way to push for the creation of an American empire of slavery was through the actions of filibusters, men who led unofficial military operations intended to seize land from foreign countries or foment revolution there. These unsanctioned military adventures were not part of the official foreign policy of the United States. American citizens simply formed themselves into private armies to forcefully annex new land without the government's approval. An 1818 federal law made it a crime to undertake such adventures, which was an indication of both the reality of efforts at expansion through these illegal expeditions and the government's effort to create a U.S. foreign policy. Nonetheless, Americans continued to filibuster throughout the 19th century. In 1819, an expedition of 200 Americans invaded Spanish Texas, intent on creating a republic modeled on the United States, only to be driven out by Spanish forces. Using force, taking action, and asserting white supremacy in these militaristic drives were seen by many as an ideal of American male vigor. President Jackson epitomized this military prowess as an officer in the Tennessee militia, where earlier in the century he had played a leading role in ending the Red Stick War and forcing the Creek Nation to cede millions of acres in Alabama and Georgia. His reputation helped him to win the presidency in 1828 and again in 1832. Filibustering plots picked up pace in the 1850s as the drive for expansion continued. Slaveholders looked south to the Caribbean, Mexico, and Central America, hoping to add new slave states. Spanish Cuba became the objective of many American slaveholders in the 1850s, as debate over the island dominated the national conversation. Many who urged its annexation believed Cuba had to be made part of the United States to prevent it from going the route of Haiti, with enslaved black people overthrowing their captors and creating another black republic, a prospect horrifying to many in the United States. Americans also feared that the British, who had an interest in the Sugar Island, would make the first move and snatch Cuba from the United States. Since Britain had outlawed slavery in its colonies in 1833, black people on the island of Cuba would then be free. Narciso Lopez, a Venezuelan who wanted to end Spanish control of the island, gained American support. He tried 5 times to take the island, with his last effort occurring in the summer of 1851, when he led an armed group from New Orleans. Thousands came out to cheer his small force as they set off to wrest Cuba from the Spanish. Unfortunately for Lopez and his supporters, however, the effort to take Cuba did not produce the hoped-for spontaneous uprising of the Cuban people. Spanish authorities in Cuba captured and executed Lopez and the American filibusters. Efforts to take Cuba continued under President Franklin Pierce, who had announced at his inauguration in 1853 his intention to pursue expansion. In 1854, American diplomats met in Ostend, Belgium, to find a way to gain Cuba. They wrote a secret memo, known as the Ostend Manifesto, thought to be penned by James Buchanan, who was elected president 2 years later, stating that if Spain refused to sell Cuba to the United States was justified in taking the island as a national security measure. The contents of this memo were supposed to remain secret, but details were leaked to the public, leading the House of Representatives to demand a copy. Many in the North were outraged over what appeared to be a Southern scheme orchestrated by what they perceived as the slave power, a term they used to describe the disproportionate influence that elite slaveholders wielded to expand slavery. European powers also reacted with anger. Southern annexationists, however, applauded the effort to take Cuba. The Louisiana legislature in 1854 asked the federal government to take decisive action, and John Quitman, a former Mississippi governor, raised money from slaveholders to fund efforts to take the island. Controversy around the Austin Manifesto caused President Pierce to step back from the plan to take Cuba. After his election, President Buchanan, despite his earlier expansionist efforts, denounced filibustering as the action of pirates. Filibustering caused an even wider gulf between the North and the South. Cuba was not the only territory in slaveholders' expansionist sights. Some focused on Mexico and Central America. In 1855, Tennessee-born William Walker, along with an army of no more than 60 mercenaries, gained control of the Central American nation of Nicaragua. Previously, Walker had launched a successful invasion of Mexico, dubbing his conquered land the Republic of Sonora. In a relatively short period of time, Walker was dislodged from Sonora by Mexican authorities and forced to retreat back to the United States. His conquest of Nicaragua garnered far more attention, catapulting him into national popularity as the heroic embodiment of white supremacy. Why Nicaragua? Nicaragua presented a tempting target because it provided a quick route from the Caribbean to the Pacific. Only 12 miles of land stood between the Pacific Ocean, the inland Lake Nicaragua, and the river that drained into the Atlantic. Shipping from the East Coast to the West Coast of the United States had to travel either by land across the continent, south around the entire continent of South America, or through Nicaragua. Previously, American tycoon Cornelius Vanderbilt had recognized the strategic importance of Nicaragua and worked with the Nicaraguan government to control shipping there. The filibustering of William Walker may have excited expansionist-minded Southerners, but it greatly upset Vanderbilt's business interests in the region. Walker clung to the racist, expansionist philosophies of the pro-slavery South. In 1856, Walker made slavery legal in Nicaragua. It had been illegal there for 30 years, in a move to gain the support of the South. He also reopened the slave trade. In 1856, he was elected president of Nicaragua, but in 1857, he was chased from the country. When he returned to Central America in 1860, he was captured by the British and released to Honduran authorities, who executed him by firing squad.